Today, we're going to show you how to set up your VOL855 8-ohm 100-watt wall stereo volume controller. This is perfect for controlling the volume in your home theater setups. So as you can see, it comes with the controller itself, 2 screws to hold your controller with your electrical box, a cover for the outside of the controller, and 2 screws to hold it all in place. Now this is a stereo volume controller and does not have a built-in amplifier, but instead supports an external amplifier. So the power from your external amplifier is split 50 watts to the left side and 50 watts to the right side. And this controller will work with any standard home audio or pro audio systems that operate with 4 to 8 ohm speakers. Now if we take a look at the controller itself, you'll see that it has an impedance compatibility switch. This gives you the flexibility to match different amounts of speakers to your volume controller and then to your amplifier, and create setups that you would not have been able to use if you were only hooking up your speakers directly to your amp. Now before you set the switch on your controller, we suggest you check out the impedance of each speaker to see if it's 4 ohm or 8 ohm. This is an important step because this will tell you what to set the impedance compatibility switch to and how to design your setup from there. To do that, you can refer to the manual of each speaker, or in most cases, you can check the back of the speaker where the impedance is listed. The first position on our switch is the off position. You would want to use this setting for installation purposes. Next, we have the 1x position, which we would use when running a single 8 ohm speaker to this controller, which will keep the impedance the same. Now, if you're using 2 8 ohm speakers or using 1 4 ohm speaker, we recommend you first set the switch to the 2x position. However, if you're unsatisfied and you need a bit more power, then you can change it to the 1x position. If you're using 2 4 ohm speakers in parallel or 4 8 ohm speakers in parallel for the final impedance of 2 ohms, then we recommend you first set this switch to the 4x position. Again, if you need more power with this setup, you can switch it to the 2x position. And if you're using 4 4 ohm speakers in parallel or 8 8 ohm speakers in parallel for a final impedance of 1 ohm, you're going to want to set the switch to the 8x position. Now, in order for the controller to work with our speakers, we have to connect it to our amp. You'll see there's a set of positive and negative terminals for both the left and right channels, with the output on the top of the controller and the input on the bottom. First, we'll take the speaker wires that are plugged into the left and right channels off of our amp and plug them into the positive and negative terminals on the input of your controller for both the left and right channels. Then we'll take the speaker wires that are connected to the speakers themselves and plug them into the positive and negative terminals on the output of the controller for both the left and right channels as well. And for this setup, we would want to make sure that the impedance compatibility switch is set to the 2x position. Now, if we wanted to add more speakers to our setup, we could do that by wiring them in parallel and use the impedance compatibility switch to make sure the system works perfectly together. Once we've done that, we can carefully place the controller inside of our wall. Then we can use the 2 included long screws to hold our controller inside of the electrical box, place the included cover over the controller, and screw it on using the included screws. Make sure not to screw the cover on too tight so that the slider on your controller doesn't get stuck when you're trying to use it. So now I just want to show you guys how to connect your controller to your speakers and your amp. So as you can see, I have the cables coming out of the left and right outputs from our amp that we're going to connect to the left and right input terminals on our controller. So to start, I'm going to grab the cables from the right channel coming out of my amp. So we're going to take the red positive wire and plug that into the positive right input terminal on our controller. Then with the black negative wire, we're going to plug that into the negative right input terminal on the controller. So then we're going to want to do the same exact thing with the left output. We're going to take the positive and negative wires and plug those into the left positive and negative input terminals on our controller. And now I'm going to tighten the terminals with a flathead screwdriver to lock it all in place. Now I can go ahead and connect my speakers into the outputs of the controller. Again, I have the cables already connected to the speakers themselves, so I'm going to grab the positive and negative wires for my right speaker. I'm going to plug the red positive wire into the right positive output terminal. Then I'm going to plug the black negative wire into the right negative output terminal on our controller. Then I'm going to do the same thing for my left speaker and plug my positive wire into the left positive output terminal and plug the negative wire into the left negative output terminal on the controller. And again, I'm going to take my flathead screwdriver and tighten the terminals to hold our wires in place. So to summarize what we just did, we went from the output of the amp into the input of the left and right channel of our controller, and then we went from the left and right output of the controller into the input of our speakers. Now, since I have 2 8 ohm speakers running out of my controller, I'm going to want to switch the impedance compatibility switch to the 2x position, but if I want more power running out of the speakers, I can always switch switch it to the 1x position. But now we can expand our setup by adding a couple more speakers. So let me show you how to do that next. Alright, so here I have my additional speakers that I'm going to connect to my first pair through parallel wiring, which basically means I'm going to chain each speaker together for both the left and right channels. So to do that, I'm going to need 2 more speaker wires. Starting with our right channel, I'm going to take the positive and negative ends of my speaker wire and plug those into the same terminals as my first pair of speakers, with the positive going into the positive and the negative going into the negative. Then I'm going to take the other ends and plug those into the positive and negative terminals of the new speaker. Then with the other speaker wire, I'm going to do the same exact thing with the left channel speakers by plugging the positive and negative wires to our first speaker terminals, and then take the other ends and plug them into the positive and negative terminals of the new speakers. And now, since I have 4 8-ohm speakers running out of my controller, I'm going to want to switch the impedance compatibility switch to the 4x position. But remember, if you want more power running out of your speakers, you can switch it to the 2x position. So now let's switch over to a very similar setup to hear how it all sounds. So as you guys can see, I have my VOL855 all set up here in our home theater room, and I'm playing music from my RPA 70 WBT, which is connected to a pair of HC55 in-ceiling speakers. So I'm gonna start playing some music right now, and you can't hear it because we have the volume all the way down on our controller, but if I lift it up, you start to hear the music coming through the speakers. So cool. Makes for the perfect addition in your home theater setup. Now we can set up more of these controllers for different speakers in other rooms. The setup for these would be the exact same, though we'll just want to run them off the next available outputs off of our multi-zone amp. For example, you would go from the left and right outputs of your first zone into one of your volume controllers in, say, your living room, and from the left and right outputs of your second zone, you would route that to your second volume controller to, say, your kitchen. This gives you a lot of flexibility and versatility on how you can reimagine your audio setup in multiple rooms off of a single amp. So hopefully this showed you guys how easy it is to set up your VOL855 8-ohm 100 watt wall stereo volume controller. But of course, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to our customer support team through phone or email. As always guys, I'm Perry from Rockville, and we'll see you next time.